Ladies and gentlemen, the Public Works Committee will come to order. Thank you, and we have a full room this evening. Thank you to all of you for coming out. I know that you have several items of concern. In order to accommodate one large interested turnout, we are going to move item G2 to the first of the agenda, and we will take that after we have taken the consent agenda. Are there any changes to be made to the minutes?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimously approved. We will now move to the general item, and we will take item G2, please.
Item G2, consideration of city participation in local improvements of private streets, Hickory Creek Court, Forest Hills Drive, and Stacy Court.
Thank you. Now, this is an information item tonight. This is a report prepared at the request of Councilmember Taylor, analyzing a request that has been received from neighborhoods in his ward. What I expect we'll do this evening, if it's within the committee's satisfaction, is to hear the report from Mr. Turner, and then invite a representative of the neighborhood to comment. This is not scheduled as a public hearing. If y'all would work with us and send a representative or two, that would be helpful. And we'll have questions from the committee. What we anticipate based on the amount of information that we have coming in on this, that staff will need to compile additional information for further consideration of the committee, and that this would come back to us, this is all, of course, pending approval of the committee, that this would come back to us for further discussion in February. But that's a tentative plan. If it's okay with the committee, we'll move forward, though, in discussion in that item and begin with a summary of the report by Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, back in 2010, the City Council adopted revisions to our policy for accepting streets for maintenance, specifically what the requirements are and what the city's participation level would be for a road that's currently a private street to be brought up to city standards and accepted by the city for maintenance. The requirements now say that a road has to have 30 foot of right-of-way plus 2 10-foot easements at a minimum. It has to have public water and sewer installed. It must at least have been constructed over 15 years ago, and it must have 75% or greater development. Now, the requirement for 15 years and 75% development were specifically installed in the ordinance per the committee's recommendations to council to deal with situations where you didn't want developers who were responsible for bringing streets up to standards to be artificially relieved of their obligation to do so. So those were where those conditions came from. Now, the council also adopted a sliding scale provision under which you would pay for a portion of the cost of the pavement improvements in general that are necessary to bring that street up to our standards. And under the sliding scale, you look at the valuation, the average valuation of the properties in the neighborhood. You compare that to the average valuations of properties in the entire city. You take that ratio, and on page 61, you'll see the table that indicates for different values or ratios what the city's participation level would be and what the neighborhood's participation level would be. And it ranges all the way from 0% to 100% on both sides. So if the ratio is less than 0.04 or 0.4, then the city's share of the project is 100%, and the neighborhood's share is consequently 0. And if the ratio exceeds 1.8%, then the city's share is 30%, and the neighborhood share is 70%.
What is the ratio, please? That is, how do you derive the ratio? What are the factors?
Take the average value of the valuations, the property valuations of the properties in the neighborhood. So let's say it's a neighborhood that is of $100,000 range properties. So the average value worked out to $110,000. And let's say that the average value for properties throughout the city was $150,000. So you would take that ratio, 110 divided by 150, and compare it to that table, and that would tell you where the city's participation would be for that neighborhood, or for the streets on that neighborhood, or in that neighborhood. All right. So for the neighborhood that has approached the council or the committee, we've done the calculation on the sliding scale and found that the ratio would be 60% city and 40% citizens. Sorry, 60% citizens and 40% city for their particular property valuations. They do meet all the other requirements for having the roads accepted by the city. They're 90% developed. The neighborhood was the roads were built over 17 years ago. And they do have public water. Just public water, but not public sewer. We would probably be able to work with them on that because water is the big thing. Sewer can be installed in such a way as to not require resurfacing. We look at that on a case-by-case basis. So the bottom line is they would qualify under the sliding scale, but the ratio is at a level that the neighborhood does not find acceptable. They would prefer that the ratio for their neighborhood be 100%, but under your policy, it's 40% them, 60% them, 40% us.
All right. Questions of Mr. Turner about the basic policy? Mr. Clark.
Well, I was going to ask, what's the average for the city for property? What is their average? And number two, how many homes are there, residents or lots or however?
I'll have to bring that back to you. I only have the ratio. I don't have what their individual breakdowns are in the city average breakdown.
Okay. Mr. Taylor.
I'd like to have comments at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
We'll
No questions, just comments.
All right. Other questions for Mr. Turner at this point?
Can I just offer one editorial? He mentioned in 2010 we added the sliding scale and some other things. But since I have been on the council, so I'm going to guess this was probably 2003, 2004, so we actually adopted the original policy, in which case we had set a 70/30. Prior to that, it was 0.
Right.
So if you go back, again, within my tenure, which is 14 years on this council, if you go back 14 years ago, didn't matter who you were, the city didn't pick up anything. And then we have put in the sliding scale, which goes from, if you're way up there, it doesn't pay anything. If you're way down there, it pays all of it, and then it slides in between.
I have some other questions about the history of our paving, but I think I'll hold those until after we've given neighborhood representatives a chance to comment. And now, at this point, are there any other inquiries from council members? All right, thank you. We've got 9 folks who have signed up, and again, we've got to, this is an important item. We have some other items that some folks will be waiting until after you. What I'd like to encourage, if I may, is there one or are there a couple of neighborhood spokespeople who could come and sort of summarize the concerns? Please come forward, and if you would give us your name and address for the record, and
Sorry, I don't have enough packets for everyone.
that's all right. Well, we can have copies made and distributed.
Yeah, my name's Robert Phillips, 140 Hickory Creek Court.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Please take a few minutes and give us your.
Well, first thing is, I don't understand the agenda item, which is improvement of private roads, because these are not private roads, these are public roads, and have been since inception. And go back just a little history on it. In 1994, McAnally Surveying did the map for Shugart Enterprises, and this was certified in plat number, certified by William Tatum, surveyor. Statement of dedication to streets for public use, book 1853, page 3405. Shugart Enterprises, signed by K. Shugart, notarized by Skidmore. This plat was designated as public roads from its inception. As you can see on the plat and the attached details for each, for Hickory Creek, for Forest Trails, Stacy Court, all these roads have been designated as public since inception. If you'll go to any title search for properties that are closed there, obviously I have not done that, but the folks I've talked to and researched my property, And I have on my title insurance a statement of public roads. I forgot the exact dedication of streets and roads for public use, as found in Book 1853, page 3405. And so there's been at least 100 property closings, and all of these are shown as public roads. So I don't understand at all.
Let me ask a question, if I may. Were they ever accepted into maintenance as a
If you look at the main plot,
statement,
everything is signed off on all the way through. And if it's not, according to statute, you have to make the buyer aware at the time of closing. There's not been any buyer made aware of this being a private street.
I guess my question is, were they ever repaved by the state?
I don't know. I'm a new resident. This is a very stable neighborhood. I've only been there 12 years.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maybe someone else in this group could speak to it.
We can check on that. Just salute you by name.
I did. I spoke with the Division of Highways. It has never been accepted for state maintenance.
All right. Thank you very much. Please continue.
And then at that point, Sugar transferred to Greenwood and Charles by warranty deed in 1995. And then, as I said, each transaction through there has been as a public road. So, I don't understand at all why, the county accepted it, the city forced annexation, took us into the city limits, and accepted what the county had already had in place. So my contention is that these are public roads that were accepted by the county, subsequently accepted by the city, and the city's responsibility to provide the services that you promised us when you forced us into the city limits. And if there is someone to go against, then it's back against the developer, Greenwood and Charles, and not the residents who bought in good faith and have not been advised of anything other than this is a public road.
We'll ask Mr. Turner to review that question and report back to us. Please go ahead.
That is mine. My contention is totally that it's public roads, and we should not be responsible for anything. It's totally city responsibility.
All right. Thank you very much. Then, any of the other folks who have signed up, were there any other points that you needed to make to us that we needed to have for discussion, or which we might need to? Yes, if you'd come forward and give us your name and address and let us know.
Good evening. My name is Charles Fernandez. I currently live at 6101 Hickory Creek Road. Have been in the subdivision since 1999. And just very quickly to the point, our subdivision was forced annexed into the city. I believe that went through back in 2006. As you are well aware, the annexation laws of North Carolina have changed since 2006 to where forced annex. Well, I just want to read this. A couple things quickly. So our neighborhood is going on its, I believe its 10th year of paying full city taxes since we've been annexed into the city without us being able to stop that particular annexation from going forward. Since then, as has already been noted, we have been paying for full services. I have my property tax bill here, which is nearly $1,000 that I'm getting ready to send to the city. My neighbor here, Bob, we have, as a neighborhood, contributed close to $318,000 in full city taxes since we've been annexed. So the city has been receiving full taxation from us while at the same time we're being denied this service. As well, with the change in the law, I just want to read this particular paragraph. This is from the North Carolina Institute for Constitutional Law, talking about the reasons for the changes in North Carolina annexation laws, especially forced annexation. And it said of the laws that forced annexation, while beneficial to enterprising city planners, involuntary annexation is criticized because the process overrides the wishes of the property owners, many of whom consciously choose to live beyond municipal boundaries, and because cities frequently annex more land than they can realistically provide municipal services to. In response to these criticisms, House Bill 845 proposed procedural obstacles and disincentives to the rapid acquisition of undeveloped areas, notably setting firm deadlines by which municipalities must provide services to annexed areas and by imposing the cost of extending services on the municipalities themselves. It goes on to state in here that if this annexation was trying to go forward currently today, if we were able to get 60% of the neighborhood to oppose annexation, then the city would not have been able to annex us and couldn't reapply for annexation for 3 years. Now I realize that this is a current change in 2012, and that the city was within its legal right to do to annex our city. However, I find it to be an ethical issue for the city to tax us at a full rate and then come behind us and say, well, your city is not, your road is not up to our standards, so therefore we're not going to extend services. For me, it's almost a common sense kind of issue where the city, you annex us, you take responsibility for us, we begin to pay the taxes. The fact that the city was not up to city standards, the city at that time should have taken that into consideration before they annex us in. Thus, our request for the city to take the burden of the cost on repaving the roads.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Are there any other points regarding the streets that have not been made?
If you don't mind, and I apologize. My name's Lindy Johnson, and I live over at 6041, and I'm not signed up. I was out in the corridor speaking with Councilman Taylor right as we started. A couple points to make. Our roads, every year when we have issues with ice and snow, they're maintained and they're scraped by the county or the city. Somebody comes out and scrapes our roads. And we've been reporting issues with potholes, and someone from the city or the county has been coming out and taking care of those potholes on a as-needed basis. At this point, we have potholes that are 8 to 10 inches deep, and some of them that are as much as 3 foot wide. Some of the most recent ones that were patched in March, and again at the beginning of the summer, thank you, Councilman Taylor, those are starting to fail pretty quickly. And one more thing to clarify what Charlie said, as a neighborhood on the Hickory Creek side, we have paid over $3,000. When you look at $300,000 in taxes. When you look at Hickory Creek and Forest Trails together, it's almost $700,000 in taxes that have been paid. And the Forest Trail side has been maintained as well. So it almost seems like there's a gap here now where it was being patched, now it's not being patched, and the whole road needs to be done. So I understand this may come back in February with more detailed understanding of what's taking place, but my question is, what can be done in the interim from now till February? One, to prevent further degradation of the road, which is going to increase the cost of the final repair, and two, to keep us from having wear and tear on our vehicles, issues for children walking, and everything else that's going on in the neighborhood now.
All right, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Kerner, do you have information on the patching that's been done?
We'll have to check. I'm not aware of us doing any patching activity, but we'll be happy to check on that.
Ms. McCullough? All right, thank you. Any other points with regard to these streets? Yes, sir.
Mike Hunger, 6221 Hickory Creek Road. How you doing, Robert? When my wife and I bought our house, it's at the end of Hickory Creek Road in 2006. One of the first set of people that I met was Charles here and Kevin. I had a conversation with Kevin not long, so we've been there 9 years now, going on 9 years. One of the first conversations I had with Kevin was the fact that it looked like the streets weren't in very good shape. Well, as I started looking at them, I realized, number one, because I've been in new construction, bought homes in new construction areas before, and they always put down the initial coat, right, on the streets. Then they do all the work, and then at the end, after you typically, as you're nearing the end of that neighborhood, you put down the final coat and bring it up to code, basically. Well, so when I approached Kevin about it, he said, yeah, he said, I've had the same questions about the finish coat getting on the street. Well, I've called the city twice in the 9 years that I've been at that address, and twice I've been told that we own the streets and the city of Winston-Salem did not have responsibility for it, that Charles Greenwood or whoever it was that developed it was the person that I should be talking to. Well, now I'm hearing something different. So this is kind of enlightening to me from what I've heard tonight. I was under the impression that from the two conversations I had with the city that at some point that we were going to have to take responsibility for that. Well, it sounds like that's not the case from the first speaker that was up here. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that people have been asking, and we have been inquiring about the condition of our streets. And what the young lady said here just a moment ago, it is getting progressively worse and rapidly. It is not getting any better, that's for sure. Those potholes are getting deeper. And I predict that by the end of this winter, we're going to have some really major potholes. And it's not just the potholes. There are sections, I mean large sections, of the street, that the one layer of coating that we have on the streets that have completely gone away. And that's right in front of my neighbor's house that lives right across the street from me, and several other places on the street as well. So, you know, there's been inquiries. People have been asking, and we keep getting pushback. Another thing is that I've been told in those conversations that we'll have to put in sewer. I'd like to know why we have to put in sewer, but it sounds like we're being pushed in that direction as well.
That may be an error, Mr. Turner.
The ordinance does require sewer. The reason why it normally requires sewer is that sewer lines typically tear up the pavement that has just been done, so you want the sewer lines installed before. But as I was saying in the earlier presentation, it's possible to work around that with sewer. It's generally not possible to work around that with water.
All right, so we'll get a report back on that question.
My understanding is if all our septic systems are okay, then why are we being pushed into a city sewer?
Good question. We'll get a response.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other new questions? Yes, please.
Just a quick statement, Mr. Turner. My name is
If you'd come up to the mic, please, so we can make sure and get you on the record.
Okay, I'm Leslie Conley from 110 Hickory Creek Court, and I was one of the ones who had reported to CityLink, and within 3 days, the area in front of my house was patched and corrected by the city in March, and I have the information on that, and I also responded again for the same area approximately 3 weeks ago, and I have the order number for that, and I have not seen anybody, got no information emailed to me. So I was going to give that to Mr. Turner.
If you would, please. Thank you very much. We'll get that question resolved. That's a good question. All right, thanks very much. Anything else new that we haven't had presented to us? All right, thank you to everybody for coming and giving us this information. I do have some additional questions I want to pose to Mr. Turner to have available for us. Now, as I understand it, Mr. Turner, the policy in terms of whether or not a street is city maintained applies to neighborhoods equally, whether they were built new within the city limits or whether they were annexed in.
That's correct.
All right. So, do you know approximately how many miles there are of private street in the city, and can you differentiate those miles from between neighborhoods that were annexed after they were built and neighborhoods that were built within the city limits?
Don't have that information, but we could pull it together and bring it back to you.
And the reason I ask is because I would want to know for our consideration in considering changes to a policy what the cost implications would be if we were to adopt a new policy in which the city paid for 100% of the costs of bringing private streets up to city acceptance code. What would be the cost implications if we did that, since we would be required to do it for then all neighborhoods going forward?
Understood. We'll bring that back.
Can you tell us approximately how many neighborhoods have come in since the policy was adopted of the sliding scale and taken advantage of that?
Since the sliding scale in 2010, you've had maybe a half a dozen.
All right. And do you know how many of those neighborhoods came in at 100% city cost and how many came in on a split?
I'm aware of about 2 that came in at 100% city, and so we'd have to get you information on what the ratios were for the others. But I know council has approved others that were not 100%.
And could you bring back the information of what it would cost to reimburse the neighborhoods that contributed on a sliding scale?
Certainly.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Well, comments.
And we'll recognize you for comments. So let me check. Are there any other questions that we need to ask Mr. Turner to look into for us between now and February? All right, now comments. Mr. Clark, and then Mr. Taylor, and then whomever.
These are more directed to the folks here. Just a couple things. First off, Mr. Bessie just asked the question, but there are roughly about 1,000 miles of private roads in this city. Now, he's going to get the exact number. I have quite a few in the West Ward. A lot of your cluster home condominiums, a lot of their streets are private because a lot of them are gated. Just to give you an example. Second comment is there's no such thing as a county road in the state of North Carolina. All roads are either state maintained or, in this case, Winston-Salem maintained. There's no such thing as a county road. And this third is a comment, question, dilemma, whatever. It seems like to me the dilemma is, was this part of the state road system? Because when we annexed, by law, we have to take over all the state roads that are in the city.
I think Ms. Johnson actually answered that question.
Well, I want that confirmed.
It is.
Because that's a huge question.
Thank you.
I am suspicious that because, and I read in here somewhere that the developer never put the last 2 inches on. I am concerned the state never accepted them because he never finished them. And the gentleman that made the comment earlier, I have seen several places where the developer will put in some asphalt so the mud's not tracked everywhere, but we'll come in at the very end and put the asphalt down. But that is a very important question to get answered, because I think it will get to that question being, was this part of the state road system? Now, I am perplexed, and by the way, I'm not an attorney, and there are the rooms scattered with attorneys. If you have a deed that says it was a public road, and in fact it wasn't, to me that raises issues. I'd be curious to see what your title insurance would say on that. But that's a good question. I don't know the answer to. Just be it there. I do know that we have had not many, but a few instances like this of stuff that was annexed in, and through the history of time, what exactly happened was lost or whatever, and we're going to have to go back and reconstruct that. If there is a light at the end of the tunnel, it is this. If you were not in the city, the state would do nothing for you. Zero. Let me finish, please. The state will only accept roads that meet the standards. So once you got them to the standard, the state will accept them. In this case, with our current policy, and whether or not we change it, we'll see, but with our current policy, the city is going to throw in at currently around $70,000. But there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, but I just want everybody to know we got to dig through this and find out, were these in fact state roads? Or did the state never accept them, and why? And kind of what are they? And I've heard some very conflicting comments here, and I'm not going to guess what they are, because they are folks that are expert at this that will research it, but I look forward to the answer there, because I think there's a lot of unknown here.
We'll have those answers. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I just ask that you bring back the information that you've heard from the citizens who have spoken and from some of the council members who have spoken. This is very important to me because, the community, I did start to get some calls and some concerns from some of the community members. I won't belabor the hour, but we did have a community meeting. From that community meeting, we ended up having a second one, and the community was just completely concerned about the annexation in 2006 and some of the fallback from that annexation. And the fact of the matter is, there's a council chamber full of people here who truly believe, and I agree, that they've been paying into the system for 9-10 years, and they feel that they haven't received the level of city services that they deserve. Now, our job here is to put our foot down in the sand and try to deliver those services, and that's why we're here today. But it's important that we hear them out, we get the information, and I am embracing their comments and standing behind them and advocating for 100% of the cost-sharing program. So I just ask that the state road system, the sliding scale, all the other questions that we've asked, we come back with that information, and that we consider either looking at 100% of what they're asking for, or the possibility of changing the policy. Either way, this community has a very valid point, and it's important now more than ever that we stand behind them. And not only is this community experiencing this problem, but there are communities in the North Ward and several other areas of the city who are experiencing this problem, and we should try to move forward with addressing it.
Mr. McIntosh?
Just a couple quick questions and some comments. Does the developer still exist? Is he still in business?
Yes.
Greenwood Charles? Okay. So is there any legal recourse against that?
We can take a look at it.
Okay.
I don't know if
Because that seems to be where the problem existed, because it is typical that one layer of asphalt gets put down during the construction phase, and then at the finishing of the job, then the developer is required to come back and finish it off, just to prevent exactly what we're dealing with here. I know that now we have a bonding policy, I believe, so that there's money put aside, so if a developer does not finish the deal, his bond gets used up. I'm assuming this was finished in the late 1990s. Was there not a policy at that time?
It would have been in the city, so we wouldn't have been involved in it.
So that's a city policy, not a city-county policy. This county does not have the same policy.
The county has no policy about roads. They don't have roads.
That's right, it's a state road. Okay. And I do just want to point out that if the figures that you're quoting about the taxes that are paid, we get less than 50% of that revenue. The other part goes to the county, so just, we're not getting rich here.
Ms. Montgomery, then Ms. Adams.
Yep.
Those were just city, thank you. Okay, thank you.
In reference to one of the comment of the immediacy of what's being dealt with in the neighborhood, I'm not sure what is possible to be done in the time of being able to figure out where we land with a final conclusion. But what I do hear and from the neighborhood is that there's some things immediately that are happening in terms of 12-inch, 14-inch potholes that are in the street that are particularly dangerous. I know for myself, even downtown, and this is one right down the street. I had my front and back tire blew out for a pothole, so I know that can become some issues. And so, is there something in terms of understanding what we did before, if in fact we did go out and cover up pothole in the past? Would we do that again, or how would we deal with that standard of just at least being able to deal with the immediate portion of some of the potholes in the neighborhood, not yet addressing the issue of repaving the whole neighborhood, but in the immediacy being able to deal with the pothole situation?
That feels like a legal question.
I'll have to look at it. My concern would be if it's not really a city street, expending public dollars on something that's not public property or in the city's road system.
And if,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm saying, and if in fact we did, I think the gentlewoman came up and stated that she called and we came out and did something. If we've done that in the past, does that justify?
Not if we did it outside of our authority, and I just need to see if we have the authority to do it.
Yes.
I just want to say, valid point brought up by Councilman Montgomery. Before you guys start to make a ruling, the staff, Madam City Attorney, Mr. Turner, if we could just kind of meet to figure out if we can come up with a plan to address the interim. There is an immediate problem, and I don't know that we can hash that out at this table right now, but there's a problem, and we don't want the snow and the ice to compound that problem and for us to, have to pay more on the back end. So if we can meet maybe sometime at the beginning, towards the end of this week, and try to work together with a community plan, I'd appreciate that.
That's a good idea. Let's defer that immediate question to a meeting between Councilmember Taylor, Attorney Carmen, and Mr. Turner. Ms. Adams.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Bessie. My question to Mr. Turner is, I would like, and maybe we've already asked for this in some form, I'd like the information about the other projects that we did, how the age of the neighborhoods, how did it come to be that we did this? I know because of the policy, but to what extent did we have to do it? And again, the cost of that. I also feel like that, to Councilmember Clark's comment, there was a time when we wouldn't even be discussing this. This was an attempt by this council, right, wrong, or indifferent, to try to do something back in 12 because we were getting these requests, and because of the way the city's policies and ordinances were written, we had not been able to do anything. So we figured better to do something than nothing. Amazingly so also, Mr. Turner, get us the information of those neighborhoods or streets that came with the request that we do something but maybe walked away from the table because they just weren't satisfied with what we had to offer. Going forward, again, once we find out the information, and the thing about this council, we are data information driven, we will find out the history of how we got to this point, and our attorney and her staff will look into whether we can force somebody's hand to come back and do right, something that they did wrong, which they signed off that they did the work and they didn't do the work. So now we're into a legal issue. I do feel like, though, as Councilmember Montgomery said, sometimes, again, I always say this, we have to make decisions that we don't like to make, but we make them because it's the right thing to do. I think for the time being, with winter coming, I look at Game of Thrones. Winter's coming, and regardless of that 70-degree stuff, it's coming, and it's going to be a good one. I think we need to look at, Mr. Turner, Mr. Garrity, and the committee, what we can do as a body to do something for safety's sake. You know how I am about safety. We got to do that because they are our citizens, right, wrong, and different. Again, sometimes we got to just suck it up and go do something that's just the right thing to do. So the first thing that I would do, as Councilmember Montgomery said, Mr. Garrity, Mr. Turner, and I know that the attorney is probably saying we can't do anything, but I beg to differ on that because there comes a time when we got to do what's right and what's just. And the first thing is priority with the city of Winston-Salem. Whether our police have to go out there and answer a call and hit a pothole, our fire trucks or anything else, our emergency responders, I say take care of the safety part of it first, which are those, somebody go out and look at and review, take pictures, document the condition of those streets, first and foremost.
Mr. Clark.
Ask the question to all this. Do y'all have street lights?
No.
Okay.
Some people live there.
Okay. Let's look into that too, because typically, Mr.
We'll get that.
Turner, we do not have street lights on private roads. Is that correct?
We do not have street lights on private roads. There may be security lights that neighbors have put in, or there may be private
Let's
lights.
check into that too.
We'll look into
I'm not saying for this neighborhood, but I'm saying in general.
Please, I'm trying to talk to the assistant city manager.
Throughout the city, there are neighborhoods that have had private street lights put in by Duke Power, that Duke has a rate structure that they charge for that. As you know, we hire Duke Power. Duke Power installs lights for us.
Let's check into that too. The reason I mentioned that, within the last week, I have gotten a call from 2 neighborhoods that have private streets that would like public street lights. And I checked, and the policy was you can't have street lights. But if you do have lights, that's interesting too. So let's check into that one.
If you have additional information on that, Mr. Phillips, if you could give that to Mr. Turner. Briefly.
It is brief.
Yeah.
And I'm going to refer to General Statute 136, 102.6F. Prior to entering any agreement or conveyance with a prospective buyer, the developer and seller shall prepare and sign, and the buyer of the subject real estate shall receive and sign an acknowledgement of receipt of a separate estimate known as the subdivision street disclosure statement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just going to reiterate, more than 100 title searches have been done based on the information in the county register of deeds / city register of deeds information, and all of these title searches are based on this. These are public streets.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, and if you would get that information to Mr. Turner. Oh, it's in the folder. Thank you. We have that. We appreciate that. Okay. Just in summary, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming and presenting information to us this evening. I think we're all in the committee here in agreement that we need to treat everyone equally, and that's why I was asking for the information about what the cost implications would be citywide if we effectively changed the policy so that all private streets would be, on request, brought up to city standards and accepted for public maintenance 100% at city cost, because it is a broad question. Each of us represent areas that are neighborhoods that were built with private streets and have not been accepted for public maintenance. And so this would be a broad implication. Now, we have from time to time, as do councils everywhere, reconsidered policy decisions and in some cases changed them. What you in effect have brought to us is a request to revisit a policy that we most recently changed in 2010 and change it again. And we're going to gather the information, and as we have started gathering from you this evening, it will be brought back for that full policy discussion in February, and you are invited to come back and join us at that time. In the meantime, Councilmember Taylor, Attorney Carmen, and Mr. Turner will meet separately to consider that question regarding legality of emergency repairs. And legality is an issue because we, by law, cannot direct city departments or staff to expend public resources to fix private property outside of what the law allows. So that does have to be both a practical question and a legal question, but an expedited review of that question has been set up. So again, thank you for coming this evening. We'll be back on the agenda in February.
Thank you.
All right, then let's go to item G1, please.
Item G1, consideration of renewed annexation agreements. Ordinance approving a renewed Winston-Salem Rural Hall annexation agreement. Public hearing scheduled for January the 19th, 2016, and ordinance approving a renewed Winston-Salem Clemens annexation agreement. Public hearing scheduled for January the 19th, 2016.
All right, thank you. Mr. Turner, is this an information or an action item tonight?
Action item, Mr. Chairman.
Please report.
Mr. Chairman, last month we presented information to you on proposed annexation agreements that were requested for renewal.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Last month we presented information to the committee. Last month we presented information to the committee on proposed annexation agreements that were proposed for renewal by both Rural Hall and Clemens. As we indicated at that time, what these two communities are asking for is that the agreement between the city and their community that exists currently be renewed with no changes. As you also recall, when we talked about this last month, annexation agreements are not commitments to annex. They're not agreements to annex. They are agreements about what the boundaries are between the two cities, between the city and the other community, if those communities decide to annex in the future. In other words, they set forth the restrictions that bind the cities to future annexation decisions. They do not make any commitments about current annexation. I know there's high sensitivity based upon the last item that we just discussed about annexations. We wanted to make that clear for everybody again. So what this item is for is asking council to consider at a public hearing, after a public hearing, the renewal of existing agreements with no change in the boundaries. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the January 19th hearing is not something that's already been set. It's something we're being asked
It's proposed for the council to set if you recommend it to council to go forward next week.
Questions or comments? Ms. Adams.
Yes, Mr. Turner, thank you for the map and the legend, but I would be curious to see if you could possibly get me something that shows the boundaries of the North Ward as well, because the way my ward is configured, I got a city inside the city of Winston, inside the North Ward, and now I got Rural Hall also, which is confusing not just for me, but for the constituents as well, that now I see, the way it is right here, I'm a little bit concerned. So if you could do that for me, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Other inquiries? Excuse me. From somebody who has a voice, anything?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right, further discussion? If not, those in favor of the recommending the renewed agreement with a hearing date of January 19, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That was 1A and B I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to item G3, please.
Item G3, updates on Winston-Salem Transit Authority Comprehensive Operation Analysis. This item was continued from the October and November meetings of the Public Works Committee.
All right, thank you. Now, we've had extensive discussion of the item. What we have is a report back on some questions that were raised prior to and at our most recent meeting. Ms. McCullough.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Perhaps if you can bring the mic down. Thank you.
Is that better? At the October meeting of this committee, the Winston-Salem Transit Authority and the City of Winston-Salem Department of Transportation presented the comprehensive operational analysis revisions, which considered comments received during our public hearings. At that meeting, you all asked us to go back and determine if we have met the federal requirements of proceeding with the project. And Mr. Turner, one of the citizens on Route 16 and also Route 44, made some comments about the elimination of that route and the desire to continue to provide service to his area. So this memo covers those items. The first part talks about the federal required notification process. FTA requires, based upon the size of our transit services, requires that the Winston-Salem Transit Authority has a written procedure and policies in place. And included in that procedure and policy for any changes that are made on the routes, we had to make sure that we did a few things. One, we are required to hold public hearings, and those public hearings must be at locations that are accessible to all potentially interested parties, the existing riders and any potential riders. And we met that requirement by holding public hearings in multiple locations throughout the city, at the Transit Authority, and just about 25 or 30 locations. So the other requirement also included making sure that we had transit maps, photos, and other material available for our riders before we held public hearings, 30 days before. We also met that requirement. A third requirement was that WISTA must document all public comments received during the hearings. We documented all comments. We presented those comments to you at the meeting in October, and we keep those comments and any other comments that we've received on a file. The other requirement would be that the routes would be presented to the WISTA Board of Directors and/or City Council for action and approval of the process. And we've also met those requirements as far as presenting to both the WISTA Board and to City Council. The Winston-Salem Transit Authority Board of Directors approved on October 29 an action item to move forward with the changes to the routes upon further recommendation from City Council. So I just wanted to present to you that we have met all of the federal requirements necessary for us to move forward with the COA.
Okay. And at our previous meeting, there were remaining questions with regard to neighborhoods served by what is now Route 16.
Yes.
And staff has discussed those with Mr. McIntosh and with neighborhood representatives, and has developed modifications that would address those questions, I understand it.
Yes.
And you have presented in this memo a recommendation to add what would be redesignated as Route 28.
Yes.
With service modifications to answer those questions.
Yes.
Right. And Mr. McIntosh, do you have any questions or comments on that?
More comments. I want to applaud staff for the sort of the methodology and the willingness to listen to folks, and I think what we got a sense of was that this really impacted quite a few people in a large way. Folks who ride this bus line have actually made purchase and rental decisions to be where they are based on the availability of public transit, and I think that's something that we'd like to see more of in Winston-Salem. I think this route, the new Route 28, lends itself to future transit-oriented development because of the situation we're facing with the Business 40 closure. It is an ideal line to encourage developers to build things that take advantage of existing services. So I think it's an important current need, but I think it's also an opportunity to develop some things that we don't really see in Winston down the road. To speak about the Sunday service, folks that ride this route during the week quite a few of them are workforce, people that depend on this as their only means of transportation, and they work 5 days a week, and then on Saturday they're doing stuff, and Sunday is sometimes their only days to get out and do anything as far as shopping or going to the mall or whatever. So I do feel strongly about the Sunday service as well. But I want to thank staff for being very creative. This is the kind of thing where you pull one string and the whole ball unravels. But I think a great job is done in making this work. Thank you.
And I know that staff have made adjustments to quite a number of the routes in response to expressed concerns at the hearings and subsequently, and have worked with several of us on council to tailor those adjustments to the needs of the neighborhoods. I did, by the way, speak with Mr. Taylor before the meeting tonight to confirm that some questions that he had been answered, and he assured me that that was the case. So at this point, we are, if it is the committee's pleasure, in a posture to recommend that the city council next Monday night approve moving forward with the redesigned system, including the changes that have been prepared and including the recommended changes to Route 28 as outlined here. Are there further questions or comments, or do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, and then I'll have a question.
All right, what's the motion then?
That we move this forward.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
There's been a lot of talk about this. We've made changes, this, that, and the other. When we first started off, our goal was to optimize the bus routes in a revenue neutral or expense neutral standpoint that it was going to cost. Because right now with the subsidy, annual subsidy, I think it's around $3 million, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that.
Correct.
It would be nice, and you can certainly bring this to the council meeting. Here's the change, and I don't know, are we adding the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and all that?
All that.
If we could add that to it, I'd like to know what, with all the changes we've made, if this thing is still close to be revenue neutral.
We'll bring that information.
If this thing's $500,000, $1 million more than what it is now, then I'm not going to support it, but I will support it. And I will say, the West Ward is not served by the bus system. It's even worse with the new one. But I have gone along with this because I hear from the other council members that this is better. The routes seem to be better. But I do want to be sure that we have not, by one step after another, significantly increased the budget requirement. Because I do know, for example, yesterday in public safety, we were looking at a lot of money there. And as the chairman of finance, it has to make all this stuff balance in 6 months. I just want to know what I'm up against.
I think I can answer off the cuff that it's no longer as perfectly revenue neutral as originally proposed, but we'll get a total for what the additional cost.
Because there've been other changes. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we'll do it. Other yes, Ms. Atkins.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Montgomery, then Ms. Atkins. All right.
Thank you. I just want to make for the record for the meeting that Councilmember McIntosh had, I was at the League of Municipalities board meeting in November 18th. That's why I couldn't attend that. But again, I want to thank staff because most of those riders are in the North Ward, Polo Road coming towards downtown and Wake Forest and Bethabara Road. Again, as we said, and Councilmember Clark, I know I along with the other council members, like to thank you for being willing to at least support us trying to make this better because, as was stated, 95% probably of the people that ride transit, they have to ride it. They don't get the option that we get, to go get in your car and go where you want. So I think it shows another level of what this community is trying to do is we are trying to find some balance in the services and the quality of life, whether that's housing, transportation, poverty, whatever. We're trying to work on all these different pieces to make it work. My question is to Mr. Turner, and I kind of figure, and I know that whatever we do is going to work out. We just better make sure we got the PR marketing side of this down. And I would hope that council will get reviewed on it in a visual step-by-step of how it's going to be done. Because if it doesn't work, then the house of cards will come falling down on all of us. And again, as you said, Councilmember Clark, we did this because it never been done before. And that's just like all the policies that we have. We eventually have to circle back around based on the leadership and where the times are and relook at some of this stuff that we may not have even, we did in a business, we would look at it, but we haven't looked at it. So we saw that there needed to be some changes. The demographics of the city has changed. Where people live has changed and work. So we needed to go back and look at it. And I just want to thank staff and everybody that was involved and the community, the people that ride it, for helping to bring this to fruition. Again, be patient. It's not going to fly the first few weeks or month, but we'll be working diligently to make it transparent to everyone again. Thank you.
And just a couple of, I'm sorry, Ms. Montgomery. I almost forgot you again, please.
One question and comment in terms from an implementation standpoint, time in terms of when, if this goes through on Monday, when would an implementation propose to begin?
I think the implementation, it will be probably months to years, from, maybe a year, at least up to a year. The implementation plan will include marketing, like Councilmember Adams mentioned, but it also includes looking at different policy changes. We've got a pilot project right now looking at, for instance, our location of our shelters and it's as far as the location and the type of shelters that we use. And so we've been developing in the background policy statements to identify where these stops will be, and so identifying those stops, changing out the signs, and coming up with a new sign and determining the sign locations with the shelters and things like that still need to be developed and worked through. So it could be anywhere from the 6 months up to a year, but we could report back to you on it. I'm trying to spell that out a little bit more detail.
And for me, that'll be very important to be able to have the outline. I would have almost have desired for that to be a part of what we bring, because once this is passed, people are going to be thinking and wanting to know when, where, and how. And to have that kind of lingering out there for a period of time, I think as quickly and intentionally as possible, I think it'll be important to know that for the greater public and those who are using it, so that we don't have people creating their own timelines in terms of when things are going to happen with expectation. Well, the next week the lines are changing, and we know that's not the case. So being able to have that, even though there's much more marketing pieces that'll take place, but this goes forward, people will begin to perceive for themselves and understand, so when is it actually going to take place? And so that's very important, that timeline, to understand it. But I too, when we looked at this in the original portion of efficiencies within the system, I say to Tanique and your staff, I say thank you very much for your time and your diligence with this. Art, to you and your staff, I know you all took some beatings out there in the community, but again, thank you for your diligence and your hard work in this process of being able to take something, look at it, and reimagine how it is in order to attempt to provide a better service to the community. To Councilman Clark's point, in terms of cost, I'm not sure, and we will see probably, I think, time in a sense of the efficiencies that may have been gathered out of the process of changing, what type of impact that has on ridership in terms of, does that have an impact on ridership by increasing the number of riders because of the dependency of their ability to be able to ride it, because they can count on it more efficiently rather than 30 minutes rather than an hour, and some of the transfer points of being able to have more direct service to locations. So my hope would be that with any of the changes that take place, that we would be able to see an increase in ridership in the system itself for those discretionary riders who would choose to ride, and those who are not bound because of the fact that they don't have any other means of transportation. So as we're looking at this, I hope that even in that marketing material that we're doing, that we're pushing that fact as well, to try to push and see more discretionary riders to ride the bus system because of the fact that those increase efficiencies in some of the routes. But again, I say thank you to staff and for the hard work of getting us to the point we're in now. And I know there's still some people who we'll probably still have some concerns or thoughts about everything, but I think to where we are now, I think this process was much like former Councilwoman Wanda Mersch would say about the budget. This was like making sausage, and it was pulling together those pieces to make something work. And I think that's what we have here, the best that in this process that's been developed. So again, thank you.
Yeah, sausage making in public.
Yeah.
Get that. I think we can have a better idea by Monday night about the time frame. My understanding was that a minimum of 6 months rollout, and probably longer, perhaps a memo for Monday, sort of outlining the anticipated time frame for implementation. And I'd also like to thank the staff and the public for their participation in this process. We have a system that is decades old. It had never been thoroughly revised in response to changes that have developed since the system was founded. Instead, it's been sort of added to piecemeal and tweaked piecemeal over time, and we've reached a point that it was no longer an efficiently operating system. So we needed a thorough analysis and revision, and that's what we have recommended to us, is an overhaul of the system design to both be more efficient in how it spends the public's money and to be more effective in service delivery. There will be more frequent service on high-demand corridors and in targeted locations. There will be better designed service provision in terms of where it comes from and where it goes to better serve more folks. For the initial run-through, the instruction was to staff, come back with a revenue-neutral plan, and we can look at adjustments after that, and that's the way we did it. And we'll have the number on the estimated annual additional costs that the revisions will put forward, and each council member can make her or his decision about whether the system as proposed is worth that additional increment. I'm inclined to think that the majority will agree that it is, but that will be a legitimate decision point for council members on Monday night. That's sort of the nutshell. Further comments or questions? If not, those in favor of the motion of recommending that we approve this to carry forward for Monday night, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous, and that will come up on Monday night. Thank you very much. We got one. Yes.
To
Ms. McCullough. Ms. McCullough.
she ran.
Don't run so
Let me get away from this.
She's like, I got away.
Spartans run all the Spartans.
It was just a point, and it'd be the committee's say so if it comes back at some point to discussion. But I know I'd request in terms of information come back and getting that information around similar possibilities of heat bus route kind of concept. I would like to have the information come back in a presentation where we have the ability to have some discussions about it from a committee level, sometime maybe in next year. And I know there's a dollar associated with doing anything like that, but being able to look at what that looks like and if it's even feasible for us in the community here, and if so, being able to go back out to those stakeholders to be able to say, if this is something that you all are really interested in, this is what it would take to actually do something like that.
And that's a concept. HEAT is an acronym from Greensboro, right?
Right.
What does it stand for? Higher education, something or other?
Yeah. It's the route that connects all of the college campuses in Greensboro.
There you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Higher education.
All right, so we'll get
Smart people in the room.
we'll get a report back on that in the coming year.
Yes.
Correct. All right, thank you very much. Nay, we'll let you get away, Ms. McCullough, this time. We do have one more item, and thank you again for the patience in staying for this. Ma'am?
Item G4, a request from the Airport Commission of Forsyth County to reduce stormwater impervious surface billing. This item will continue from the October and November meetings of the Public Works Committee.
All right, so gentlemen, if you'll come forward and let me explain why this is in the sort of procedural posture it's in. We did have a request from the Airport Commission to modify our stormwater fee policy, in particular with regard to especially the runways. This was an item of discussion back and forth between staffs for some time. It was initially scheduled as a consent agenda item in October based on my misunderstanding that it was being recommended as the only legally appropriate decision by the city. It was pulled off the consent agenda for discussion in October and by other members of the committee who clarified that I was mistaken on my understanding. Therefore, it was reset for November, and the invitation was to be extended to the Airport Commission to come and discuss it with us at that point. For some reason, that communication got messed up, and so it's been continued again to today's meeting, at which we are pleased to have representatives of the Airport Commission here to present your request and discuss with us the reasons for making that request. If you would please give us the name and an address for the record and let us hear from you, please.
My name is Tom McKim. I live at 2840 Calumet Street, not at the airport. I'm the chairman of the Airport Commission. I'm here this evening with Mark Davidson, who's our airport director, and also Mr. Jim Shaw, who's one of our airport commissioners, Scott Piper, who's also an airport commissioner, and Ted Kaplan, who's both a county commissioner and an airport commission member.
Right, gentlemen, thank you for coming, and if you would proceed, please.
Okay, we have a brief handout and that sort of summarizes the request. Basically, we're requesting a reduction in our stormwater fee payments, primarily by virtue of asking for an exemption for the runways and the taxiways at the airport to have them removed from the calculation because on the notion that they constitute public thoroughfares. Basically, the airport is a public use airport by virtue of the various grants that the airport has received over the years from the federal government and otherwise. We are required to maintain the airport as a public use facility, and the runways and the taxiways are basically there as analogous as roadways. I mean, it's a way for any aircraft that is seeking to come to or depart from Winston-Salem to use those runways and taxiways in order to accomplish that. The reduction that we're requesting is approximately a 45% reduction in the total impervious surface area of the airport. So we're not asking to have all of the surface area of the airport exempted from payment. There are various ramp areas where our tenants at the airport that they use for their business purposes in connection with their activity. But we're trying to focus this request on the what we view to be the primary public areas of the airport. Somewhat of financial significance to the airport is the fact that the payments that we make on an annual basis for stormwater fees are the single largest line item other than our salary expense on a recurring basis. So it's the single largest recurring line item. It's about, for us, it's about $118,000 a year. And so that, in terms, if you were to equate that to the net income of the airport, that represents about 20% of what the net income figure is for the airport. The airport is financially self-sustaining, but we're not exactly, making a lot of money out at the airport. And one of the things that's very important to the airport is to be able to have money available to provide the local match for funds that we are able to get from the federal government. If we are able to match federal grant money, we can leverage that money on a 9-to-1 basis. So for every dollar we can put in to fund a capital project, we are typically able to get $9 from the federal government and through North Carolina's Department of Transportation Division of Aviation. So to the extent we are paying money for the stormwater fees, it certainly inhibits our ability to have funds available to devote to capital projects. Some of the capital projects, including a project quite recently, are directly related to matters related to stormwater drainage. We just completed a project that was required of us by the FAA, that we had to spend $280,000 to accomplish that project, and that's a significant expenditure for the airport, given what our revenue picture. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but basically we think the situation is of the airport is somewhat different because of the fact that we are a public use airport. The runway and taxiway areas are very analogous to thoroughfares. It's our understanding that the substantial majority of airports, public use airports in North Carolina, do not pay stormwater fees. I think there are some exceptions, but typically airports, it's our understanding, do not pay these fees in other areas.
We do have a report from our attorney's office on that question.
Although I note that if we're talking about the same report, the survey that you have available was limited to only 5 airports, and there are currently 74 public use airports. And if a broader sampling of airports were taken, I believe that they would show a substantial majority do not pay these fees.
Have you undertaken a survey?
I think the North Carolina Airport Association has conducted these kinds of surveys.
Do you have that information available?
Not with us, no.
Okay. Is that something that you could put together for our?
It's Mark Davidson, Airport Director. North Carolina Airport Association puts out these surveys to determine what the fees was about 1.5 years ago. A lot of non-respondents, a lot of counties operated the airports, or a lot of cities, and I think your survey was just surveying the cities within city limits in North Carolina. Airports within city limits.
That was sort of the apples to apples comparison we were looking at. But if we've got other information, we'd like to see it. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Yes, Mr. Montgomery.
Just in looking at the summary report that we have here, particularly one of the items that are listed there in terms of revenue diversion and the 1533 drainage improvements, that project, was there a request made to the city in reference to support or participation in assisting with that project?
We had a meeting, I would say, with Lee Garrity and the mayor. Was about 6 months ago. We informed the city about our projects, but we typically, historically, have never gone to the city for any assistance.
Okay.
Mr. Clark?
I have 3 general comments. Does this be appropriate time to do them?
Let's see if we've got any other questions for our presenters. And then I wanted our attorney's office to summarize the information that had been gathered at our request. Or would that be Mr. Turner? Who would be some? The information.
City, that was Mr. Turner.
All right. And then I'll want the presentation from our attorney on the legal question. And then for general comments, if I may. Yes.
I do have a question about the matching funds, and can we get a brief description of what the capital plan would be and how to use those matching funds once you attain them?
We have just as part of the financial management of the airport, we maintain a capital budget each year. In fact, at this afternoon's meeting of the Airport Commission, we happened to approve a package of amendments to that.
I guess my question goes, is there something big planned? Is there
we have a number of projects. Some of them are quite significant. We typically have the opportunity to get more grants than we can fund. We don't have enough money to provide the local match for the grants that are available to us. And so we often find that we have to complete our capital projects over a much longer time frame than we would like, simply because we don't have the funds available. So that's why anything like this is very significant for the airport.
Any highlights on what's on the capital plan?
We're in the process of relocating the primary taxiway out at the airport to meet FAA mandated separation requirements between the taxiway, the center line of the taxiway, and the center line of the runway. We also have a number of smaller capital projects. Mark, you can.
As you mentioned, Taxiway Quebec, Taxi Lane Lima would head north of the airport towards Lansing Drive for development. We have obstruction removal east of runway 1533, and that's about $2.1 million. that taxi lane Lima, if we have a ramp associated with it, would be about $6 million. A ramp, it's in front of if you've been to the air show, it's adjacent to the terminal building. That's a $2 million project. And we rank really high in the state with this. The NCDOT actually manages the FAA money, so we rank really high compared to other airports in the state because we're our busy traffic with recreation, business, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. So they're trying to give us money, and like Commissioner McKim said, we just don't have the local match sometimes, so we have to hold off on some of these projects. We can't be as aggressive as we want.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery? I mean, okay. Mr. Montgomery, do you have additional? Okay.
Too much NyQuil.
Yeah. Actually, I think I need some more NyQuil. Mr. Turner, would you please summarize the information that we had requested in terms of your findings on North Carolina public airports within municipal city limits and how they treat the stormwater billing?
Certainly, and that is, I guess, the key point is that the committee asked for other municipalities that we were aware of that had airports within their jurisdiction and what they did regarding stormwater fees, specifically whether they provided an exception under their policies for stormwater runoff or stormwater taxation for those facilities. Asheville said no, they did not. Charlotte said no, they did not. Concord said yes, they do, and that it was part of an economic development agreement between the city and the airport. Bedville said they did not, and Greenville said they did not. There was also a question about whether there was a fee credit for implementation of stormwater controls, and that was basically if the airport had its own stormwater controls process or permit, whether the city then gave credit for that. We weren't able to get information from Asheville. Charlotte said yes, that their airport had its own permit or its own process, as did Fayetteville and Greenville. We also weren't able to get information from Concord.
Do you know, in the cases of the cities that had that credit, was that a one-to-one for every dollar spent, or was it a partial?
I'm not aware. We'll have to go back and check.
Questions? Mr. Clark?
Can I give my free general?
No, now I have the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
will defer to the city attorney.
Now, the question of sort of the legal issue of is this something we can do based on how it's interpreted under law? Is this something that we should do? And do you analyze that question, and would you report, please?
Let me start off by stating the question that was actually posed of me by staff, which is whether or not the city is legally required to grant the requested exemption for runways and taxiways. And no, there's no legal requirement for the city to grant the exemption that's being requested. Then the follow-up question was, is there anything that prohibits the city from granting the requested exemption? And my response to that was no, I'm not aware of anything that prohibits the city from granting the requested exemption, but just be mindful of the fact that there may be others who come and ask for the same exemption. In particular, what came to mind during the discussion was the school system and, I guess, the travelways for the buses and so forth. So that was the nature of the discussion I had with staff, which I think in essence answers your question.
So your caveat was to note that there are other users that we would have to treat similarly if we approve this change.
There is the potential for that, yes.
Other questions for Ms. Carmen? Mr. Montgomery.
And it would be, I guess, a parallel, Mr. Turner and Ms. Carmen. But did we not grant some concessions to school system here not too long ago in reference particularly to the Career Center and the development there and their stormwater and drainage? There were some things I know that we worked with them on in reference to that helped to pull their costs down.
What we approved for the Career Center was for governmental entities for the stormwater permit and stormwater management fees that normally have to be paid up front or bonded. We said that they would not have to bond because they were a governmental institution. were not going to dissolve, and we would always be able to go after them if issues occurred. The bonding requirements were to protect the community from developers who might disappear or who might, over time, no longer be there. The other condition we put on that relief of the bonding was that governmental institution had to agree to incorporate their management fees in their annual budget. But as far as the fee that's paid for stormwater, we did not change anything for the school system.
Okay.
Can I offer sort of 3 points? Is that just generally about this in the sense that I think there are...
I'm not allowed to, but you go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, just in terms of the ability to distinguish our situation from that of other people who also have impervious surface area that might come in and also seek an exemption, I think we are differently situated in several ways, one of which is, obviously, as I've mentioned, this whole notion of being a public thoroughfare that has a rather unique role, plays a rather unique role for the city and for the county. This is not a Walmart parking lot. This is something that is part and parcel with the generation of substantial economic activity for the city and the county, and we're required to keep it that way in order to, and this is really my second point, in order to get these grant dollars that we can use to leverage into capital projects to the benefit of the airport. And finally, I also think that the airport is in a somewhat different situation because the stormwater runoff from airport surfaces is typically stays within the boundaries of the airport. I mean, we have 715 acres there. The runways are more or less in the middle of a lot of grassy areas. So a lot of the stormwater that rolls through the runway and these taxiways, we believe, doesn't really enter in a material way into the stormwater drainage system of the city. It's sort of contained within the boundary of the airport.
I think our stormwater folks might take issue with that last.
There are creeks, but not in terms of the creeks. Most of our water goes into a couple creeks that boundary the airport now. But in terms of
have downstream impacts.
But it's typically viewed to be as because of the nature of the activity, it's typically considered to be much cleaner water than is your typical runoff from a Food Line parking lot.
I think we're going into debate.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, you've been very patient. So you have observations, comments?
I do have 4 observations. The first one relates to the comment just made. I've been on this council for 14 years. If you were to ask me, and I do get asked this question periodically, what has surprised you the most about being on the city council? And it's a very quick answer. It is stormwater. It is truly a problem, and it is the creeks, not the pipes that get the water to the creek. There are creeks in this town that are approaching the small Grand Canyons that over the years have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you want to see one, just look and see what Silence Creek has done to the backs of the neighborhoods as it goes through Old Sherwood. I was actually at someone's house when some of the azalea bushes that they had planted, the bank actually fell down while I was standing there and part of their backyard disappeared. So it is a real problem. Number 2, I'll address this to Mr. Kaplan. And I may get in trouble because I'm not speaking for the council, I'm simply speaking for me. But maybe it is time to relook at how we manage our airport. We have a joint city-county water and sewer and landfill. I think the landfill is also managed by the Utilities Commission. Maybe it is time, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, to take a basic look at how we manage that airport because it is in the city limits now and it does approach our neighborhoods. And I can only speak for myself, but I would certainly be interested in, I think it would be appropriate to use public funds to assist in upgrading what is, I think, now a asset that is grossly underutilized. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't have anything more specific than that, but if you want to talk to your folks, and I can talk to my folks, but if there is an interest, because right now it's all just the county, and you don't need to answer that tonight, but just food for thought.
Let's not get into it.
Okay, anyway,
take that.
Number 2, this question has already been asked, but are there any projects, or does our stormwater policy at all apply to anything that the airport might do? And that's just a question for staff. The third one, this is indirectly related to this, but I actually got a call on this doing all this. I've got a building going up right now in the West Ward that they did everything times 2 of what was required from our current stormwater. And across the street is a shopping center that's 35 years old, and they don't do anything but dump it in a creek, and it's 9 feet wide behind the neighborhood. Is it appropriate for new construction that meets all our current standards to pay the same rate per square foot as older property that hasn't done anything? I bring it up tonight because the airport's asking for $60,000 reduction. Well, I might go back and say, why don't we have a policy that says if you meet current standards, you get a discount, whatever that may be. And if you don't currently meet it, that will give you an incentive to meet it.
Nice.
And I can tell you right now, the money doesn't even come close to paying for the damage that I see just in the West Ward. And I have seen, there's a gully right off Country Club, it's at least 15 feet deep. It is that deep behind these homes. It would cost well over $1 million just to fix it, and it's 4 or 5 homes, maybe 6 or 7. What I really want is a program that incentivizes folks to capture that water to prevent the runoff. So I throw that out for food for thought. It would certainly apply to the airport as well, that if they wanted to put capturing, it sounds like to me it may not be that difficult for them because they got 700 acres they could put a pond in somewhere. But I'm not so sure that our current policy properly incentivizes people to correct the problem versus simply everybody throwing the same thing in. And I know that's way beyond the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but I think it's a potential solution for not only the airport, but for other things. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery.
Good comments. But one thing I will ask, on the dollar amount that's being requested here in terms of credit-wise, question in reference to impact. What, can you explain to me the impact, if we defer that, if we give that as credit, what type of financial impact does that have in reference to actual operations? When you think about stormwater, you think about utilities, you think about that, what type of impact, what does that equate to?
As far as impact on the stormwater fund, it's approximately 0.5%.
Okay. And then from a question, and this may come from the chair or the director, when you think about the current operations at the airport today and those who are using the taxiways and the runways, the non-private, those that are not private planes that are coming and using those taxiways, what percentage is that?
I'd have to say that, I mean, the vast majority of aircraft that use the airport are private aircraft. I mean, they're not military aircraft.
Well, maybe the question is, maybe I'm asking it the different wrong. In terms of, when I'm thinking of private, I'm thinking of individual, personal, non-commercial in the standpoint of non-business associated, where I'm thinking of a company, a BB&T or Wells Fargo, a company like that may have a private a plane that's flying in, and one that is not associated directly to some of the companies that are actually operating at the airport itself. And the reason I'm asking that question in terms of as we ask the dialogue around public use and the public use of the runways is a conversation of the usage of those who are currently utilizing those today in terms of how does that differentiate it between those who are currently using the runways and the taxiways that are there, and how does that equate to what's the other companies that may be within the park itself around the airport?
We have probably somewhere on the order of about 45,000 operations a year at the airport, which is an operation as a takeoff or a landing. And the mix of that is a little hard to tell you with precision. We have a number of the corporate aircraft that are owned by companies that are based here in the city or the county. We probably have somewhere on the range of, I think, 70 jet aircraft. That we could check that number, but we probably have about 70 jet aircraft that are based out there. There's a smaller number of private propeller aircraft that are used for truly sort of personal transportation. The jet aircraft are typically owned on a corporate basis, and so they are used by our local corporations to do their business. There's also the business of flight training, flight instruction. We have a fairly active flight school out there, so private individuals and veterans that are trying to get flight training actually account for a fair number of operations at the airport. But we can try to get more precise information on that breakdown if it would be helpful.
And the reason I asked that, for me, in talking about it as from the perspective of public runways and that concept, if I'll go down Peters Creek Parkway, everybody and anyone would utilize that. And so the limits of the runways and taxiways there to who and what type of business activities are associated with that would be of interest to me just to understand. But from the backside, and this is to the committee, when we look at this and the dollars and what we're, the conversation around should we do credit, should we not do credit, looking at this from an economic development standpoint, I would be more than happy to dialogue around how do we look at this and how do we see the investment made, particularly when those dollars are going into some type of economic development to make sure that the airport itself is being able to have additional payback to the local community. That perspective, I think, is something worth debating and worth continuing to try to figure out how we get to a place like that, and then going back and making sure that the cost balance is something that can be done. But that's a part of it, particularly the economic development. I think I forgot which city it was named from those that we look at that.
Concord.
Concord. I know we didn't get some stuff, but I would be interested to see of how that's drafted and how that specifically looks.
Mr. Taylor, do you have anything?
Nothing at this time.
I would be interested in seeing more information on how the free fee credit is handled by the cities in North Carolina that offer that. I would certainly be interested in any information from the airport authority regarding other cities within municipal limits that we have not surveyed for us to take into consideration. The request is in a posture that we could recommend favorable consideration by the full council. We could recommend, or we could vote not to make such a recommendation, or we could hold it in committee for further information to be brought forward for our review. And I would ask if there are any comments from committee members or other council members present regarding your recommendations.
Thank you, Councilmember Bessie. I agree with Councilmember Clark on some of the suggestions and questions he had about the way, no different than our own transit authority, on the efficiency and what it's doing, and even in light of Councilmember McIntosh asking about the economic development initiatives or projects, be able to, just like he said, give us something that we can look at and say, okay, this is for the betterment of the city. I think we need to share it jointly, just as he suggested, some of these other bigger infrastructure type initiatives that we have. I think the citizens of Winston-Salem might want to chime in on this. I think we might need to have a public meeting or something, because if you ask the comment that the gentleman made about the amount of stormwater and its effect on the communities, you ask those people over there that live in Castle Heights and Bowen Park and that creek that runs around Bowen Park, they would tell you a different story, or Walkertown or whatever, just like Councilmember Clark said. I remember that creek when it was just a little creek. That creek is now as wide as from that wall to over here, if not wider. So I have some concerns about it. I still don't think we have enough information. I'd like more information from staff on some of the concerns that the committee raised before I could move further on this for me.
Comments? Mr. Taylor?
It sounds like the recommendation might be to hold it in committee for further information. The only other option would be to send it forward without a recommendation, but it'd be my request that we hold it tight, get the information back from staff, and we make the appropriate decision at the appropriate time.
All right, I'll take that as a motion to hold in committee and continue to gather information. Questions have been raised regarding the specific treatment of the stormwater fee and other similarly situated cities. We'll be gathering more information on that. Suggestions have also been raised about alternative approaches in lieu of giving a credit or an exemption. In lieu of the requested exemption, we could look at other mechanisms for cost cooperation between the city and the airport authority. And those are possibilities that can be further discussed by committee if it's the consensus of committee members to hold it for further review. I'm getting 2 nods, Mr. Montgomery. All right, I'm getting 3 nods. All right, so okay, what the committee's pleasure is to hold the item for further discussion in committee. We've requested some additional specific information for consideration further of the original request for an exemption, and we've also raised questions that could go into further future discussion of alternative approaches to financial cooperation. Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Garrity, is this some time-sensitive information?
I don't think, I mean, I think there's, obviously the Airport Commission would like the relief as soon as possible, but I don't think there's any critical time issue.
Okay. There's no specific deadline. I know that the request has been out there for some months from the commission, and I'm sure it's clear that the commission as a whole would prefer an immediate yes to the exemption. I don't hear that motion coming from any of the committee members at this point. So in lieu of that motion, which would be in order if I'm wrong, what we'll do then is hold it in committee, and thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to come out and present to us this evening, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation. And we will reset this for February. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there further items to come before the committee this evening?
No.
All right. Hearing none, we will consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you.